The Bayeux Tapestry is an embroidered picture story about 70 meters long, told across 58 surviving scenes. It begins in 1064 and follows the events that lead to William of Normandy's invasion of England and the Battle of Hastings in 1066. The surviving cloth breaks off with the English fleeing, and its original ending is missing. Look at the Bayeux Tapestry from left to right, and something odd happens. The invasion does not begin with William. It begins with an English king speaking to Harold, then Harold sailing towards Normandy. The embroidery never tells us what Edward said or why Harold went, yet it places this journey before everything else. By the time William's ships cross the Channel, the pictures have already taught us to see invasion as a consequence. That is the first clue. This is not simply a record of 1066. It is an argument made by sequence. Calling that argument propaganda can mislead us. We do not know who commissioned the work, where it first hung, who first watched it, or what its missing end contained. Bishop Odo is a plausible patron, not a settled fact. The British Museum's current assessment is that a Norman patron probably commissioned it, and English embroiderers made it, drawing on Canterbury manuscripts. So this was not a medieval ministry of truth issuing a simple poster. But propaganda does not need to invent everything. It can make one version of power feel lawful by choosing what comes first, what receives emphasis, and what never receives an explanation. Harold is not introduced as a coward or a fool. He prays, feasts, travels, and fights. During the Breton campaign, he wades into dangerous water and rescues 2 Norman soldiers from quicksand. He and William ride and campaign together before the oath appears. That generosity matters to the story. A broken promise by a contemptible man would prove very little. A solemn promise by an admired warrior can become a tragedy. The embroidery first gives Harold stature, then makes that stature carry the weight of what follows. At Bayeux, Harold places his hands across reliquaries while William watches. The caption says that Harold made an oath to Duke William. It does not say what he promised. Written Norman accounts supplied a fuller claim, but they disagree with the embroidery about where the oath happened and when. The uncertainty is legal. The visual message is moral. Sacred objects surround Harold. Later, the story returns to him wearing a crown. Later still, he falls. The sequence turns an oath whose content we cannot recover into the cause that makes invasion look like redress and defeat look like punishment. That reading is strong, but it remains an interpretation of the arrangement, not proof of a contract. When Edward dies, the embroidery calls Harold King of the English. It attaches no insult to his name. Beside the throne stands Archbishop Stigand, whose contested status could damage Harold's ceremony in Norman accounts. But the picture does not show Stigand placing the crown on Harold's head. Then a comet appears. Men point upwards. Beneath Harold, ghostly ships gather in the border. His kingship is shown as real and at the same time made ominous. The embroidery can undermine him without calling him a usurper. Again, arrangement does the work that an accusation might have done less persuasively. Now the rhythm changes. Trees come down. Boards become ships. Weapons, armor, food, and horses cross the sea. William consults, organizes, feeds his men, secures the coast, and, in battle, lifts his helmet to show that he is still alive. None of this proves that the English crown was legally his. Together, however, these scenes make competence visible. Harold's moral position turns on one ambiguous oath. William's strength accumulates through preparation, command, and survival. Order begins to look like legitimacy, and victory begins to look inevitable. Selection matters just as much as sequence. 3 weeks before Hastings, Harold defeated another claimant, Harold Hardrada, at Stamford Bridge, then marched south to meet William. The surviving embroidery does not show that English victory. Its absence does not prove censorship. No historical artwork can include everything. But the missing episode would complicate the moral shape we have been given. Harold would appear not merely as an oathbreaker waiting for judgment, but as a king defending his realm from one invasion before confronting another. The surviving story ends with the English fleeing at Hastings. The cloth itself is incomplete, so we cannot claim that its makers deliberately excluded William's coronation or the events that followed. We do not know what the lost ending showed. We do know that victory on one October day did not complete the conquest. Resistance continued. English landowners were dispossessed. Hundreds of castles helped secure Norman rule, and the upheaval took a generation to unfold. That distinction is crucial. In the surviving embroidery, the military verdict arrives at once. In history, conquest had to be enforced after the battle. The frame closes before that longer process can change the meaning of victory. Yet the embroidery preserves what crude victory propaganda might erase. Harold rescues enemies and receives a full royal image. Norman troops burn a house while a woman and child flee. The battlefield margins fill with bodies as English and Norman lives collapse into the same violence. These images do not make the work secretly English, and sympathy is difficult to prove from stitches alone. But they stop the story becoming a clean contest between a rightful hero and a worthless villain. Modern scholarship has therefore challenged the old idea of a straightforward Norman press release and has found room for English, Anglo-Norman, and deliberately tactful readings. So, was the Bayeux Tapestry medieval propaganda? Yes, in the most important sense. It makes conquest feel like the lawful answer to betrayal. It gives William's rule a moral sequence, a competent leader, and a victorious ending. But legitimating narrative is the more precise description. The work respects Harold, exposes suffering, and leaves its central oath, patron, audience, and ending uncertain. Its power lies not in a crude lie, but in arranging disputed things so that one conclusion feels natural. Who wrote history? We cannot name the patron or the embroiderers with confidence. What we can see is the choice they stitched into the cloth. History here is not just victory recorded, it is the order in which we are taught to look.